talking today to Nico Macdonald, who runs an organisation called Media Futures, which looks at the future of media. Nico, when and how did ebooks start?
Well, ebooks started in a way when we were able to take traditional book publishing and digitise it, actually to produce print books again. That was called desktop publishing. That created the possibility that books could be digital and distributed digitally, and there were some early initiatives by companies like Voyager, who were one of the pioneers of CD-ROMs in the 1990s, to publish books electronically. They published books using Apple's HyperCard platform on floppy disks, and they were very interesting and very innovative at the time, and still look quite innovative.
So it's taken about 20 years to...
It's taken about 20 years. The problem with floppy disks is they're very difficult to distribute and expensive to copy. At the same time, Apple had a now much forgotten product called the Newton Message Pad, which was also a platform for ebooks and was quite a popular platform. The platform didn't survive Steve Jobs' return to Apple, however. The really key development has been that not only can you digitise books, but you can both distribute them electronically over the internet, you can pay for them electronically, and we have devices now which are cheap enough and usable enough that people can read on them.
What's the level of ebook purchases compared to print across different countries?
In the English-speaking world, particularly the United Kingdom and North America, it's very high. Ebook sales, at least in the area of literary fiction and so on, outstripped hardback sales last year. It varies tremendously. We need to bear in mind that publishing is actually many disparate industries which don't have much in common, from educational and reference publishing to non-fiction, fiction publishing and children's. And each of those has a different, challenge with electronic books. So for instance, children's books in the traditional form don't work very well on a Kindle reader. Fiction books do work very well because they're primarily text.
And how do those sales, you gave the comparison with hardbacks, outstripping hardback sales, but what about paperback sales, which are in a sense the bread and butter of publishing?
Yes. Well, again, in paperback fiction, I think it's very likely that sales will outstrip probably in the next 2 years. And also we need to bear in mind that book sales are increasing because there are more potential outlets for books and also more potential authors and publishers.
And what proportion of book titles is not available in ebook form still?
I don't know the proportions, but I think the challenge for any kind of publisher is finding a platform that they can adequately reproduce, if not a facsimile, then something perhaps better than they publish in an existing form. So if we take something like a book called The Magic of Reality, which is a Transworld publication of Richard Dawkins' book, that's been created as an iPad app, not as a facsimile of the printed book, but as something which allows kids, for instance, to do experiments on the way in which the sun's rays bend around the Earth, and to use the affordances of the iPad to allow them to have a new kind of experience. So in a way we can't necessarily look at the proportion of sales because the tendency will always be to invent new things that take advantage of the new platforms.
So it's a combination of old forms and new forms simultaneously?
Yes, and I think one of the challenges we have is that any new solution to something tries to solve an old problem, which is how do you distribute books more effectively, more cheaply, and so on. But then it throws up the possibility of new ways of reading, new forms of narrative, literature and engagement. And that's the real challenge, is finding the people who are creative enough and imaginative enough to find what's possible, if you like, and then to create a way in which that can become available to everybody.
What are people reading their ebooks on? I mean, who's winning the e-reader device stakes?
Strictly in the e-reader device stakes, it's still Amazon with its Kindle and Kindle Fire, which is a kind of multimedia reader, certainly in, again, the English-speaking developed world. There are a number of competitors in the US, Barnes & Noble, which is a big book retailer, launched the Nook 3 or 4 years ago, which has been very popular and Microsoft has invested in as well. There's also Kobo, which is an independent startup. Again, they're sort of Me Too products in a way. They don't do anything qualitatively different from the Kindle. Nevertheless, they do have some advantages. But Amazon, partly because of its existing customer base, it's now a more than 15-year-old company, has been able to take advantage of people's acceptance of it as a retailer and all their history of buying with the company.
And will the mobile phone become an e-reading device, particularly smartphones?
Well, in a way it has already, and I think particularly in Japan, even before smartphones, mobile devices were being used for short-form reading, and in fact new forms of reading were almost created for that platform, and that says something about Japanese culture and society. I think the challenge is actually not so much will it become a platform for e-reading, because it already is. The challenge is more, how do we allow readers to move between the platforms that they have in an easy way? A smartphone will never be the best thing for reading on unless it's an audiobook you're listening to, which is another area that's somewhat neglected here, in which case it's ideal. But maybe it'll be the best thing you've got to hand, in which case you may want to read a chapter or two while you're waiting for the bus. When you get home, you may want to carry on reading on a nicer, more comfortable device that hasn't run out of power, and that might be a Kindle, it might be an iPad, or it might be something else.
What are the issues in terms of getting books from one device to another? Because it is a bit complicated thus far, isn't it?
Yes. Well, I mean, there are issues in terms of licensing, and DRM, digital rights management, has been a considerable issue across the media industry in the past. I think the issues are increasingly being resolved. So if you buy a book on a Kindle, it will appear on the Kindle device, on your smartphone if it has a Kindle reader, on your desktop if you have the Kindle software available. Likewise, Apple's iBooks will download to any device that's logged into the same iCloud account. So really the issues there are not so great. The challenge is more, will it synchronise to the page that you were reading before? Will it download any annotations that you've made on another device? Which is partly a function of just needing to be online, which at least in the developed world you can more or less take for granted now.